From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. I'm going to start today with a reminder. We're pretty excited around here. This Friday, February 4th, marks the return of Charles Purcell Presents. That is our weekly offering of both scripted and improvised radio theater, spoken word, audio collage, by myself, the CBP Ensemble, and some guest artists. We ran the show for about a year, and then when COVID hit, we suspended production. But here we go. Now we're going to post new episodes every Friday. Charles Purcell Presents. I'm really excited about it. It'll air on the radio side on Fridays, and it'll post on your favorite podcast platform, except, of course, for Spotify. We're not on Spotify. We are in allegiance with Neil Young in that regard. So, but all other platforms, just check it out anytime after midnight each Friday. Not to confuse things, that would be as it turns from Thursday to Friday, that midnight. That can be a little confusing. So for those of you just dying to listen, I'm not exactly sure how the inner workings of the mechanics, actually happen. I post it to my host site, which is Libsyn, Libsyn. Maybe that's the first place to go. In fact, now that I think about it, that's good advice. If you really are just waiting, and if you're watching the seconds tick on your clock to midnight Central Time as it turns to Friday each week, if you just can't wait, you should go to Libsyn, Libsyn, and look for Charles Purcell, and that'll be the first place it shows up. The mechanics I'm not sure about is how it gets to the other platforms, Apple Podcast or Podbean or whatever, all the different platforms. I'm not sure if that happens like boom, right at midnight when it posts on Libsyn, or if it takes some time. I think it takes some time to get through all the tubes and wires of the internet, which I always say kind of mockingly and people laugh at, but there are tubes, there are wires. Okay, it's real. It's not like you just snap a finger and boom, instantly something is there. No, there's a process. There's an actual mechanical process that happens. Anyway, for this kind of really riveting, extemporaneous kind of conversation, go to Charles Purcell Presents. No, it's very little conversation. It's mostly just the odd stuff. Like I said, radio theater, sound art, audio collage, for lack of a better word. Lots of spoken word stuff, some commentary, but not like The Log. The Log is straight commentary, culture, politics. Charles Purcell Presents is a really nice weekly diversion. So we're excited here. That's the big deal. And then, of course, so The Log moves to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday with a repeat offered on Thursdays, and then CBP on Fridays. Okay, so there's that. I kind of hate to start any episode with inside information because for some it's awfully tedious and boring. Rachel Maddow did that the other night. I happened to catch her show from the beginning. I tune in occasionally to Rachel Maddow. Often she loses me because she spends 20 minutes making some really esoteric, historic connection to the story she's eventually going to get to in the news. And some people find that very interesting. I find it pretentious and boring, to be honest. But she started the other night with kind of inside baseball news. Well, I'm going to be taking some time off from the show. I'm going to be working on this movie. I'm helping to produce a movie that's based on a book I wrote, it's a podcast she had a while ago, and they're making a movie out of it, I guess. And so then she's got some other projects, and she spent like 20 minutes talking about herself and her projects. I was like, okay, I guess fans appreciate that. I find this to be true in podcasts generally. often they'll do what I'm doing right now, which I find really annoying. But I guess I'm taking a little bit of a chance here. I'm taking a little bit of a risk. I wonder if you find this annoying that I'm talking about myself and my shows. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you're a really big fan of the log. Maybe you're a big fan of mine. And maybe you find this fascinating, that I've got this news for you, for my loyal listeners. God, I find it really just dumb and pretentious and narcissistic. And the fact that I've been going on for, how long have I been doing this now? For the last 5 minutes or more. At least I don't start with ads, which almost every podcast in the world does. And oh my God, they'll just go on and on. You know, whatever it is, some special fertilizer you want to put in your apartment garden, made especially for apartment gardens. AGF, apartment garden fertilizer. Get it today. The homegrown herbs that you grow for your kale salad are just really going to be especially wonderful if you use our new product. And don't forget the product code, and don't forget to mention my name when you place your order. Oh God. This podcast, it's my guarantee to you, I will never sell you anything. I will never do it. You'll never have anything sold to you via an ad or a product placement, a paid recommendation. I'm not an influencer. God, I hate all that. It's the ruin of the world. All right. Enough of that. Let's go to a news story I saw in the New York Times earlier today. It didn't surprise me one little bit, but still it's upsetting to read. Reading from the Times Now, writer Stacey Cowley. Hanging over the $800 billion Paycheck Protection Program, one of the government's most expensive pandemic relief efforts, is a simple question. Did it work? New research, drawing on millions of wage and payroll records, suggests a complicated answer. Yes, but at an extraordinarily high cost. One new analysis found that only about a quarter of the money spent by the program paid wages that would have otherwise been lost, partly because the government steadily loosened the rules for how businesses could use the money as the pandemic dragged on. And because many businesses remained healthy enough to survive without the program, another analysis found the looser rules meant the Paycheck Protection Program ended up subsidizing business owners more than their workers. Now, we holler about this all the time. We were just talking about it the other day. Anytime you got all these millions and billions of dollars of public dollars flowing around, you're going to have people who are very good at this. They're expert at this. It's their job. They get up every day, and this is their mission. They're lawyers. They're accountants. They work for corporations. They work for big businesses. All right, there's money out there. Let's go get it. That's their specialty. So whenever you got these big public funds floating around, they're going to be susceptible to that. And so that's why this is not the least bit surprising, but it's no less upsetting. Jobs and businesses are two separate things, said David Autor, an economics professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, who led a 10-member team that studied the program. We tried to figure out where did the money go, and it turns out it didn't primarily go to workers who would have lost jobs, which was the intent. It went to business owners and their shareholders and their creditors. Questions about the success of the program have gained urgency as the Omicron variant of the coronavirus disrupts the country's economic upswing, intensifying calls for hard-hit industries like restaurants for a new round of federal aid. Can you even imagine? Now, I'm coming at this from a total lefty position. I think people should be helped. I think this is not a right-wing criticism at all, but it is still it's very much a criticism. these awful, convoluted, Rube Goldberg, well-intentioned, but poorly aimed efforts at relief are never going to make it to their intended target. Well, okay, no, I shouldn't say never. They did. 1/4 of the funds made it actually to the people they were designed to help. But when you filter, the more steps between the money itself and the people who need the help, the more steps in between, the more opportunities for corruption, for theft, for finagling, and you get there. Most of this, probably all of this, was perfectly legal. They just are very good at this. So most of the money intended for people in danger of losing their jobs went to their bosses, went to the stockholders of the company. 75% of it. Reading again here. Congress rushed to create the Paycheck Protection Program in the pandemic's early days, trying to prevent struggling small companies from gutting their workforces and adding to the staggering unemployment rate. The program offered business owners low-interest loans of up to $10 million to cover roughly 2 months of payroll and a few additional expenses. The loans would be forgiven as long as the money went to permitted costs. I mean, you can see how just unacceptably complicated this is right from the very design. And this is my big complaint about Democrats. 2,000, 3,000 page Rube Goldberg bills with so much opportunity for corruption, for mistakes, for whatever. I don't care how well-intentioned you are. You're not doing this right. Nearly every company in America with 500 or fewer workers, and some larger ones, qualified. Law firms, construction companies, restaurant chains, as well as Uber drivers, freelancers, and the bars, boutiques, grocery stores, and hair salons that are the backbone of many main streets. All right, so I won't read the whole article here, but you get the idea. It was a huge program. A lot of people were helped, but 75% of the money went to people who didn't really need it. It just lined people's pockets. And that's why we have to separate. We have to separate profit from everything. You and I have gone over this ground many times. You know how I feel about it. The profit incentive has to be abolished in literally all walks of life. In an emergency like a pandemic or name any other emergency. I mean, the pandemic is the slow rolling one, right? But it's analogous to kind of quick hit emergencies, floods and earthquakes and that sort of thing. You got to get the help to the people who need it. If you have 2 or 3 and 4 stages between the money and the people, this is going to happen every time. It's just inevitable. And now, yeah, we are at the stage of the pandemic. Nobody knows what the hell's going to happen next. We're still at 2,500 plus per day. It's going up. The number is not leveling off. It's certainly not going down. Yeah, the cases are going down. We keep hearing about that. Hospitalization rates are still just dreadful, but they're leveling. Death rate, though, still climbing. When that levels and starts to fall, who knows? Maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, maybe a week, maybe 2, I don't know. At some point, that death rate will level and start to fall. And then who knows? Just in time for the next variant, we don't know what that is going to mean. Get anybody to try to tell you the future on this. So yeah, there are actually people talking, again, very well-intentioned people. God bless them. Well, we need more relief. No, we got to find a new way to do this. And the only way to do it is to stabilize this just way too volatile world of work and money and pay and wages and emergencies and illness and disasters and pandemics, and we're on this roller coaster. It's just not necessary. So we just have to guarantee basic human rights for everybody, regardless of our current condition. If we're kind of running through a nice, easy spell, nothing really bad happening in the world, or we're in this horrible shit show, regardless, 24/7, 365, all of us need to be guaranteed basic human rights. That is that's the bottom line foundation. And then when emergencies do hit, you don't have to worry about starving or becoming homeless. All basic human rights must be guaranteed. And if I have to spell that out, it's pretty simple. Food, healthcare, housing, education. Just the basics. No one should have to work for any of that. Work and money need to be separated entirely. And then, of course, the reason for all of this, well, we have to get people back to work because the economy has to keep growing, which is the second big old shoe that needs to drop. We have to turn our so-called economy on its head so it doesn't rely on consumption. It should rely on the exact opposite. The more people save, the less they spend, the fewer resources required. These should be the driving forces of our so-called economic life. Because when consumption is the driving force of an economic system, overconsumption is inevitable. It's just baked in. There's no avoiding it. It's going to happen. So we got to reverse engineer this thing, and we got to turn it on its head. Our material well-being, because we do need material things, obviously. We need food, we need clothes, we need places to live, we need healthcare. Of course, we need these things. But the only way we're going to be able to get those things, and I mean all of us, in a just and fair and equitable way, is to turn our system upside down. We have to incentivize simplicity, incentivize less consumption, fewer use of natural resources. We talk about this all the time in regard to saving the planet. Yes, that's another reason to literally reverse, to turn upside down our current system. It's the only way we're going to save the planet. It's also the only way that we're going to be able to live without this constant threat of death or destitution. And if you think I'm overstating it, just look at the numbers. When most Americans, I forget the latest number, but it's at least half of Americans, and more than that, are living paycheck to paycheck, and they're generally behind even living paycheck to paycheck. So there's this constant state of turmoil, this constant state of anxiety. And then you toss in a little thing like a pandemic, and now you got a full-blown catastrophe. We're not talking about an inconvenience or a little rough patch until I get back on my feet. No, we're talking about tragic generational consequences here. So we need some sort of a universal basic income, just some guaranteed basic human rights for everybody, regardless of their job, regardless of their status, regardless of anything, just because they're here. We need that. And then we need to separate work from money. The two should have nothing to do with each other. And absolutely get rid of this ridiculous hierarchical system where from on high, these huge sums of money come trickling down to the people who need them, but before they're able to get their hands on it, 3/4 of it is gone because Rube Goldberg's got it. By the way, I use that expression a lot, and I realize maybe a lot of people don't know what I mean. Rube Goldberg was a cartoonist, and he drew these very elaborate, comically elaborate machines that would do simple tasks, like hammer a nail into a piece of wood. The whole cartoon panel would be filled with all these mechanisms and all these different stages, all these different pulleys and levers and balls dropping and, this kind of crazy contraption that eventually swung a hammer to hit a nail. So when I refer to Rube Goldberg, for those of you who need to hear this, it means a weirdly, comically unnecessary complication to do simple things. So that's what I mean by Rube Goldberg. I'm a lefty. Most Democrats, they really are generally good people. I really like the Progressive Caucus. But man, the Democrats have this fatal flaw. They just cannot learn this lesson. There were a lot of us yelling at the time about the Paycheck Protection Plan. Go back and check the archives. How many of us were saying, those of us on the real left, it's like, yeah, okay, we need it. $800 billion? Yeah, how much of that $800 billion you think is going to get to the people who actually need it? This is a very, very old story. A very familiar one. Jeez almighty. What else is going on? Oh, hey, can I leave you with a story that makes me really happy? I just happened to stumble on this one. It's the greatest thing in the world. There's this kid, 8-year-old kid in Idaho. He's a second grader. He likes to write books. He writes stories and he draws pictures. He writes like these comic novels, as a kid would do. My son did this very same thing when he was of that age. Well, he wrote this 81-page book about his Christmas adventures. Christmas spelled Christmas. Christmas. And took him about 4 days, 81 pages filled with, he filled up an empty journal with a whole bunch of illustrations and this story about how he gets transported back in time after the star on top of his Christmas tree explodes. I'm looking at an article here from, where did I see this? The Times, New York Times. So he gets this idea to put it in the library for other people to see it. So when his grandmother took him to the local library in Boise, in their neighborhood in Boise, this was at the end of December, he kind of sneaked his copy of this book past the librarians. In fact, he said, I had to sneak past the librarians, or the librarians, as he says, and he just put it on a shelf. And then over the next month or so, other kids discovered it and they really liked it, and they wanted to check it out. So the book, by the way, is called The Adventures of Dylan Helbig's Christmas. That's the kid's name, Dylan Helbig. So he gets home, and at some point he tells his parents about this, and they call the library, say, well, we're sorry he left his book there. We'll come and get it. And the librarian said, no, people like it. They want to check it out. So everybody started checking out this book to the point now where there's a waiting list of several dozen waiting to get their hands on this book. Everybody loves it. So the librarians now are talking about making copies. There's a publisher who's interested. This is just exactly how the world needs to work. Write a book, take it down to the library, put it on the shelf. Other people look at it. You look at other people's books. This is the way the world has to work, man. We got to take money out of everything. The kid just made it's not his only book. He's working on another one, according to this article. He's working on his next book, which, by the way, I love this. My next book, Dylan said, is going to be called The Jacket Eating Closet, based on actual events. Oh my God, you guys. This is exactly how the world needs to work. You create something, you share it with everybody. They create what they're, everybody can do something. One person becomes a doctor, the other person becomes a nurse, the other person is a writer, the other is an artist, the other is a carpenter, the other one grows food. Everybody does what they love. No money needs to be involved in this in any way, shape, or form. You just serve your neighbors. You do what you love, and then you give it away. It's absolutely simple. I love, love, love this story. He wrote and illustrated a book, and he just went down to his local library and put it on the shelf, and people fell in love with it. He's inspired other kids. Now they're all making books, and they got a writing project down at the library, and the shelves soon will be filled with books by other people, by kids especially. You don't have to be a kid. The whole world could work this way. We have invented a horrible system filled with unintended consequences, and we just need to strip it down to its basics. We all need things. We need basic material goods. We need food. We need housing. We need healthcare. We need art. We need books. We need care. Especially, a lot of people need extra care. If you're very young, or if you're elderly, if you're incapacitated in some way, a lot of people need care. There's so much that we can do for each other. And our system of money and banks and bosses and wages and employees and managers and distributors, all of it is this horrible monstrosity. So 3 cheers for 8-year-old Dylan Helbig, showing us how to do it. Also, nice job, librarians, for discovering what was going on, encouraging it, nurturing it. That's the other nice thing about this story. Happened in a library, which if there was no such thing as libraries and somebody came up with the idea today, how far do you think it would get? You think any city, state, or town, or county, you think Congress, anybody would say, oh yeah, that's a good idea in the world we live in today? Let's have public funding, buy a whole bunch of books and loan them out for free to anybody who wants them. This is an idea that wouldn't stand a chance if it were dreamed up today. But thank God, public libraries were established in a time when it was feasible, and they're still here. That's the other thing I like about this story. The library is kind of a perfect model. Hardware stores should be libraries. In fact, every retail store should work like a library. You just have all this stuff. You go, you get what you need. You take it, you use it, you bring it back. The world could be so much better. It's really not that complicated. So way to go, Dylan. You're the man. And thanks, librarians. All right. Well, let me shut up here. Time to shut up. Hey, tune in. If you're listening on radio right now, same time, Friday, just in a couple days here, for Charles Purcell Presents. Radio theater, spoken word, audio collage. Some of it's funny, some of it's serious. Mostly it's just a little odd. And I couldn't be happier with it. So I hope you enjoy that. If you're a subscriber on various platforms, it'll drop in the wee hours of the morning Friday on Libsyn right at straight up midnight. LIBSYN / Charles Purcell. So there you go. I hope you'll enjoy that. And while we have just a second, speaking of radio, let me thank River West Radio, our flagship terrestrial station, riverwestradio.com. Follow, comment, and reach me on Facebook and Twitter. You know how all that works. The website, charlespurcell.com, is your one-stop shop for everything, any links you need. So that's a good thing to know. And finally, thanks to Peter Donalds, who wrote and performed our theme song, which you're listening to right now. Okay, there it is. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.